Attorney General Pam Bondi announcing that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who had been deported to El Salvador, who the Supreme Court had said that the U.S. government had to facilitate bringing back, is now coming home because he is facing indictments, allegations, charges that for 9 years he was a part of a smuggling ring, which included bringing not only adults but children. Human trafficking for the past 9 years. You also heard the Attorney General allege that Abrego Garcia engaged in other activity that was criminal in nature. But so far, as of right now, he faces charges for smuggling adults, children, throughout this country from other countries. Back with me now is NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, and joining us also is former U.S. Attorney Carol Lam. Ken, let me start with you, your reaction to what we just heard from the Attorney General.
Well, Kristen, I think you made a very important distinction there, and you broke it down well. This is a very detailed indictment that does allege very serious charges, and it alleges, for example, he made more than 100 trips to smuggle undocumented immigrants. But it also makes allegations that aren't charged. So he's charged with 2 counts of violating the laws regarding smuggling undocumented immigrants. But the indictment repeats allegations from what they call co-conspirators that are very serious but have not resulted in criminal charges. That's curious to me. You don't usually see that in these kinds of indictments. So, for example, you heard the Attorney General say one co-conspirator alleged that he may have been involved in a murder, and another said that he was abusing some of the female detainees that he was transporting. Again, he's not charged with that conduct, so it's very important to state that. At the same time, this indictment clearly changes the picture that a lot of people had of this man, who was portrayed by his lawyer and his wife as an innocent contractor in Maryland. The federal government here, after what appears to be a pretty substantial criminal investigation, talking to a lot of different people, gathering up cell phone records and other evidence, is making some very serious allegations, accusing him of serious crimes. And it also solves a problem for the Trump administration, Kristen, because they're bringing him back when judges have ordered them to do that, and there's been some question about whether they were violating that court order. As Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, said there, that may all be moot now because he's coming back to face these charges. And Pam Bondi said that if he was convicted, he would serve his sentence here and then be deported to El Salvador. She didn't say what would happen if he was acquitted of these charges, but presumably the Trump administration would try to deport him in that event. Kristen.
Let me just remind our viewers, Carol Lam, I'm going to go to you next, a little bit of the history of Kilmar Abrego Garcia before he was deported. He came to the United States, crossed the border illegally in 2012, makes his way to Maryland. In 2019, he was assessed to be a member of MS-13 by Prince George's County Police Gang Unit. He then requested a withholding from removal, and he was actually approved for that in 2019, April of 2019. A judge granted that. In March of 2025, he was arrested by ICE and detained in Baltimore and Louisiana. And in 2025, March 17th, Senator Chris Van Hollen actually went to go visit him to be able to obtain proof of life effectively in the wake of what became a national outcry after it was determined that he was deported, an administration official telling a judge that he was deported by mistake. And that was really at the crux of what these court cases were. But Carol Lam, this is a lot of new information. And the question, the fact that the administration didn't have, or at least make this information public at the time that they deported him, what do you make of that? And what do you make of what we just heard from the Attorney General?
Right. Well, Kirsten, looking at the date that the Attorney General said the indictment was actually returned on a sealed basis, meaning that the public didn't have access to it, I think she said May 21st. So the indictment is only about a week old. And looking at the indictment, this is what I discerned from it. He is charged only with alien smuggling. This is a very common charge along the southwest border, and I was the U.S. attorney here in San Diego, so the southwest border. This charge is used very commonly, and it can mean anything from a person in the car who's not illegal, who's crossing the border, to the kind of alien smuggling that you often think of with people being hidden in the trunk or something like that. But in this case, he is the only defendant in this indictment. And this is what we would call a historical investigation. So in other words, these are acts that appear to have happened way in the past. And you'll see that there are co-conspirators who apparently gave the government information, but they are not charged in the indictment. So he is the only defendant. He is not charged as part of a conspiracy. And what that tells me is that these folks who are unnamed co-conspirators have probably cut a deal with the government and have given the government so-called historical information. So we really don't know the facts here. On a standalone basis, a 1324 alien smuggling charge is candidly not that serious. It can be serious, but it's very difficult to discern what the government is going to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, as opposed to simply the finding of probable cause that the grand jury found in this indictment.
You know, Carol, it was interesting. The Attorney General, Todd Blanche, there pressed on, are you complying with what the Supreme Court ordered, which is to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to facilitate his return? What did you make of the response that we heard there?
Yeah, I think it was sort of well, we don't really know. Maybe the judge will find that the whole issue is moot. And certainly that's what the government is hoping. They're going to be able to say, OK, we've returned him, as the court wanted us to do. And as the Supreme Court kind of said, they had to facilitate his return. But they're saving face by saying, you see, actually, he is a bad guy, and therefore don't look over there at the fact that we didn't comply with the court's order for quite a few weeks. But see, he really is a bad guy, and that remains to be seen. It, as I said, remains to be seen what can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
And Ken takes me to my next question. What will you be watching for next? What are the next steps here?
Well, now we go through the long process that results in a federal trial. There's going to be a long lead up to that. There'll be discovery. But Carol's exactly right. This indictment sketches out a skeleton. We want to see what meat is on those bones, because there's a lot of allegations in here that aren't necessarily supported by evidence. I'll be looking for what the evidence is on that. His attorney, before the indictment was made public, said in a statement that that he was accusing the Trump administration of essentially abusing his client's rights and saying he should be taken back to the original immigration judge. But clearly, there are some new facts on the table here. I mean, clearly, investigators, I don't think it was with the FBI, I think it might have been with DHS, Homeland Security agents, have done some serious digging and found some information that the government did not know when they detained him at that traffic stop in Tennessee, and even when they deported him, according to the timeline that we're seeing. And so it really does, again, change the picture of this case. How significantly it changes it remains to be seen, Chris.
Yeah, and they detained him at that traffic stop in Tennessee in 2022. We are just getting a statement from Senator Chris Van Hollen, and again, he is the Maryland senator who went to El Salvador to meet with Abrego Garcia. Let me read you part of this statement. He writes, "For months, the Trump administration flouted the Supreme Court and our Constitution. Today, they appear to have finally relented to our demands for compliance with the court orders and with the due process rights afforded to everyone in the United States. As I have repeatedly said, this is not about the man. It's about the constitutional rights and the rights of all. The administration will now have to make its case in the court of law, as it should have all along." Carol Lam, the argument of Senator Chris Van Hollen and, frankly, others who supported his decision to go to El Salvador was that this was not about whether Abrego Garcia had broken the law. It was about whether he had been afforded due process. Now he is on his way home, and he will, in fact, face a judge and will have that due process that Senator Van Hollen was calling for. Is that how you see this?
Well, of course, that was always the point. The point was that he was sort of hustled away before he had a chance to make any of his arguments in court. And whether or not he is someone who's violated the law in some other way is not relevant to the analysis here, because the next person down the line who's hustled out of the country without due process may not have any criminal liability or any other kind of liability. The problem, as the senator points out, is that we simply don't know. We just, without due process, and look, the law moves in a very deliberate slow way. Process takes time, and due process means you get the time that's proportional to the action that's being taken against you. You can't have the government moving people out of the country before they've had a chance to address whatever the allegation is. Personally, I'm very glad that the government has, in this case at least, avoided what everyone has been afraid of, which is the constitutional crisis, where the courts have required one thing and the government simply refuses to comply. At least in this case, that has been avoided.
All right, Ken and Carol, thank you so much for being here to help us unpack this breaking news. I know that we will continue to track these developments in the coming days and weeks. Thank you both so much.